Hello and welcome to the 5th instalment of my Scandinavian adventure. We had to get up nice and early in Stockholm as we had a lot planned for the day. So we had the ABBA museum booked for later in the day, and we wanted to kind of stay in that area because we didn't want to miss our time slot. We weren't sure how strict it'd be if we did miss our time slot. So we walked towards this park that was just outside of the very centre of Stockholm, and basically the park was filled with preserved buildings and other things from around Sweden and the Stockholm area for people to see. Unfortunately, the funicular there wasn't in operation. Otherwise, we definitely would have wanted to have a go in that. So this is inside of the open air museum. I think it was called Skansen. It wasn't that expensive to get in, and it was definitely well worth the visit. They had actors from different time periods there, and they also had animals from the area as well, which you'll get to see in just a second.
Tycker de är gulliga? Ja? De är ganska söta, men så här små i alla fall. Sen är det kul när de springer på taket.
Den är störst.
The park was huge, and if we'd had more than 24 hours in Stockholm, we definitely would have spent a lot more time in this park, as there was loads to see, and we missed that quite a bit because we were having to obviously rush around. But we got to see some of the cool things like these bears and the buffaloes and some of the parts of the different villages.
Titta på han.
And as you can see, we really lucked out in the weather again.
Hasta están acabando los animales.
At this point we still hadn't eaten, so we decided to head back into Stockholm to grab some food. We weren't sure where we were going to eat, and we did try a market first, but the prices were just a little bit too high for us. So instead of going to the market and getting something small, we found a Chinese buffet, an all-you-can-eat one, and we filled ourselves to make sure that we didn't have to buy too much for the rest of the day. We had a quick wander about, and then we headed back onto the trams and headed back along towards the ABBA museum.
I'll go toil and greens and...
We had a little bit more extra time before we went into the museum, so we went down to the waterfront, and that's when we found out that there was a riverboat system that we would be able to catch later in the day. Once we were done at the museum, we headed back into the centre on this ferry boat. Our next stop was going to be the underground, which I have to admit I was really excited for. Since I currently live in Glasgow, an underground or subway isn't a new experience for me. But the ones in Stockholm, as I'd seen online, are pretty much art galleries in themselves and museums in themselves. They're really, really cool. We went through two of the stations that have the art gallery sort of look to them, and I have to say the second one was probably my favourite. Although I know there's plenty more underground stations to see, we couldn't spend all day underground, so we headed on the escalator back up to the surface. When we surfaced, we were outside of the Palace and the Parliament buildings, two huge buildings in the centre of Stockholm. We saw what seemed to have been some form of changing of the guards at the Palace before wandering around the general area. Over the next wee while, we would see things like Rybinska Huset, Stockholm's narrowest alleyway, which was pretty narrow, We also would pass the Katarina elevator, and this really random statue. We also decided that it'd be wrong of us not to visit IKEA while being in the Swedish capital. Unsurprisingly, the place is huge. The third biggest in the world, I believe. We went and got food and had a quick wander around. I went for the Swedish meatballs. It wasn't long though before we had to start heading back towards the centre, as we knew it was starting to get darker. We got the train all the way along to the very last stop. We then jumped on this ferry and watched the sunset as we were sailing back in towards Stockholm. Thanks for watching this installment. Hope you enjoyed.